Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. Um, Last week, or this week, I should say, marked the 22nd anniversary of 9 11. And guess who didn't show up?
Yeah, Joe Biden was on his way home. He stopped in Alaska. And let's be clear about this. His stop in Alaska had nothing to do with addressing the military base there. Every president stops in Alaska coming in from overseas. It's to refuel the plane. So, and I am absolutely flabbergasted by Biden's non-appearance at any of the 9/11 memorials, but we did call it. We said on last week's podcast it's probably a good thing because he would come out and he would make up some story. And sure enough, as he was talking to the military folks in Alaska, he made up a story about being at Ground Zero on September 12th and seeing the devastation and how much it affected him. Except C SPAN has video footage of him in the Senate on September 12th. The Senate records have him there all day in briefings. He never went to Ground Zero and lied to the American people yet again.
Okay, how come he hasn't been called to task? A couple of things. You look at mainstream corporate media, not reported. And we'll move on. Well, I mean, when we move on to his Hanoi situation, that also wasn't promoted or uncovered or reported, I should say. Now, I believe he's always been a congenital liar. It is extremely scary. Someone can maybe fake something, whatever, that happens. But the amount of detail, uh, number one, when he was talking about his basically toaster oven fire at his house, which he elaborated on or expanded on to make it a full fledged fire. He went into amazing detail about how the fire was caught between the floors and he greeted the firemen and blah blah blah. Well, he did the same thing with 9/11. He's talking about, and he looked in and he thought it was looking into the gates of hell. I mean, it is troubling.
It is very troubling. And actually, my big concern is that he's not aware he's lying. There are a number of medical conditions that cause dementia. And yes, we know he has dementia. But there are a number of medical conditions that cause dementia that also cause hallucinations. And I am wondering, does he believe this stuff is real?
I believe it's this because they had an interview with Dr. Jill's ex husband, the one she cheated on, by the way, who owns something called the Stone Balloon in Delaware. And he had a little story. I'm going to make a long story real short. That he talked about how his mother went to the coach in the bathroom, or when he came out of the bathroom, the coach of his team as a kid, and said, "I can't believe blah 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 blah." And all of a sudden, so he had a fundraiser for Biden. Biden told the same story, only that it was him. And then after the event, instead of saying, "Hey, thanks, I used your story" or whatever, he actually said, "Yeah, my mother, she was really, really tough." Like I think he always had a serious. I'm not exaggerating. A mental illness.
It's very possible. I mean, his stories are so detailed, and yet
That's what I'm saying. Yes.
every yeah, yet every part of these stories can be fact checked and are found to be lies. And he keeps doing it. And I mean,
It's
9/11
really
9/11 families have been coming out absolutely furious. I mean, at this point, if you're a member of a military family, If you are a member of a first responder family, I cannot for the life of me understand why you would not be campaigning against him.
I can't. I think it's a growing groundswell, starting with the Afghanistan pullout, his looking at the watch, his total disregard and disrespect for the military. I think it really goes into what we've talked about before. He's never been lunch pail slash Amtrak Joe. He's always been an elitist son of a bitch.
Pretty much, yes. And now, even with the mainstream media covering for him, even with his own people killing his mic before he can make a bigger fool out of himself, it's still so obvious that he has no touch with reality.
Okay, I need to ask you this because it's a big concern of mine and possibly for some of our listeners. Do you think because you look at his poll numbers, so I'm perplexed. The mainstream media, they covered his trip to Hanoi, a complete abject disaster by any stretch of any imagination, any logical assessment. But yet the mainstream media, CBS, ABC, just kind of report just the facts, man, like in Dragnet. So how is it that so many people, as polled, I mean, over 70% think he's not up for the job? Is the message you're heavily involved in media? Is the message getting through in spite of corporate mainstream media trying to cover? Because I'm perplexed because it's not being really covered that much. I mean, anyone, if it was Trump babbling on, talking, I don't know what the hell he was talking about in Hanoi, it would have been front and center, but it wasn't. But my question is, do you think it's being covered in spite of what's going on? Are people
The
getting the information?
people are getting the information. Mainstream media right now has almost as low an approval rating as Biden does. Most people are not getting their news from mainstream media. They're going online, they're going to X, used to be Twitter, they're going to Facebook. And over the last, I would say, probably 18 months, you're seeing a lot less of the censorship that the tech companies used to do. Certainly, Elon Musk has no love for Joe Biden, and he's not going to censor any information about it. Facebook, things have been coming out through there, through YouTube, even though they still try to give their spin on everything. All of the information that's been coming out on COVID and that the social media networks blocked information from getting out, it's now put them in a bad position. So now the Hunter Biden laptop, the COVID vaccines, the COVID origins, social media, when Facebook fact checks something, most people now go, oh, well, they're fact checking it, but that doesn't mean that they're telling the truth.
Hmm. Yes, it's really interesting. You look at the ratings of mainstream, the 7 o'clock news. Walter, those days are over. With
Yeah.
Laura O'Donnell. I looked into her background. It's really funny. A complete spoiled brat in the Beltway, Georgetown. She studied at Georgetown? Liberal arts. Oh yeah. Okay, there. She was really scared if she was going to get a job. So anyway, yes, it is interesting. It is coming out there. But let's touch base a little more about the his performance in Hanoi. If you're not scared, I don't know what to tell you. He literally was bad. I have no effing idea what the hell he was talking about. I mean, and he went into the whole what are they called pig face pony thing, which is by the
Yes.
way was never a John Wayne movie. That's minor, but and then babbling just basically I think his handlers cut it off because it could have gotten really scary. And then he actually says, "I got to go to bed." Yikes!
Yeah, this is not the first time he's used the dog faced pony soldier line. And nobody anywhere that I can find online in the mainstream media, nobody can find any movie that this came from. It's supposed to be a John
Movie,
Wayne
but is
movie quote.
in his delusional state. He's putting to piecing together bits and tidbits of three or four movies and making it into one. But it's never been a movie with John Wayne about the stone cold, whatever pig pony face. It's just out of control. And I think he's finished. I don't see him. There's no way he can handle an actual campaign. Not, I mean, COVID's over. They're trying to resurrect it. I get it, but it's not going to be the same thing as it was 4 years ago. He's got to come out, do campaign stops, and this guy, he went from being teleprompter dependent. Now he's on teleprompter useless. Even with a teleprompter, it still ain't working out.
And yet, the liberal media, the DNC, they are dead set on having him run. Although that's starting to fall apart. Over the last few days, there have been several columnists who have come out and said, number one, Biden should not run. And these are liberal columnists. I believe two of them were from the New York Times and the Atlantic. Oh, and the one was from New York Magazine. But they're saying he should not run. Then they're saying if he does run, he needs to replace Kamala Harris because people will be more likely to vote for him if they think Kamala Harris is not going to be president because nobody thinks he's going to make it through another 4 years.
Okay, I think if he replaces Kamala, he'll be blowback like you wouldn't imagine from the
Oh, yes.
minority commuter, from the race
And
baiters, from the cottage industry race aficionados like Sharpton. So I think he's stuck between the proverbial rock and a hard place.
And those columnists did talk about that. They said that is the biggest problem with replacing Harris is he will probably lose the African American vote among other groups and he can't afford to lose that. And quite frankly, according to all the polls, he's already losing a big portion of them.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is because they see through that he doesn't really give a shit. He just uses them. He's done nothing for them. In fact, he's actually hurt them economically. Inflation, the people that get hurt the most are the more underprivileged. Crime going completely out of hand. I saw a little news item about Philadelphia, just like gangs in the city. I mean, it's just a complete hellhole. And who's being impacted? People that have to live in those cities. So I think he's got no enthusiasm. I think he will not attract even close to the percentage of participation and support he had in 2020. I think that train has left the station. And another very interesting situation is Kellyanne Conway. I'm not a huge fan of hers, but she was saying that like 2 weeks ago, she was convinced that it was going to be Biden. Okay, in spite of his frailties. But then when she's commenting on the recent CNN poll, a organization that perpetually covers for him, their latest poll almost designed to take him down. Not just talking about the state of the economy, like mental acuity. Is he too old? All the things, all the problematic situations or concerns people have, and she was like, "Wow, I think they're I think the night of the long knives is coming out. What do you think, Dr. Lopkin?"
Oh, I think it is because more and more commentators are looking at the numbers and have to face the idea that America does not want Joe Biden to serve another term. And now, I don't think any of these people are Biden fans. I don't think they care one way or another about Biden, but they don't want a Republican president. And since the DNC has pretty much made it clear that Biden is the candidate, and in fact, for another candidate to get into the race. I believe the deadline for a number of states to get on the Democratic ballot is actually coming up in the next few weeks. So it would be very difficult for someone else to get on the ballot. So they're trying to force the DNC to go, no, we need somebody else.
Hmm. Interesting. I thought, the DNC, they always talk about, you know, Trump being a threat to democracy. Kind of over my observation is they're not really all that set on it either.
No, the
I
DNC
mean,
has no interest in democracy. They rigged their primaries against Bernie Sanders. They rigged it in favor of Hillary in 2016. They basically rigged it for Biden in 2020.
no
But
question. In
when
fact, people don't remember that. He was actually not doing well until South Carolina, which was kind of thrown for him.
right, well, when Bernie Sanders supporters took the DNC to court saying that the DNC had rigged the election against Bernie Sanders, the case was thrown out because the supporters did not have standing to file the case. But before it was thrown out, the DNC had filed a response to the claim. And in the DNC's own judicial filing, they basically said, it's our primary. We can do whatever we want with it. And most people don't realize, or at least tend to forget, that the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are not government organizations. They're private organizations. So the DNC's big defense was not, we did not rig our primary. It's our primary. We can do what we want with it.
Well, they certainly have done a good job at that. And one thing about the Democrats, I wouldn't let them change my oil. Half of them, or more than half, have never actually worked a real job, but they are great at manipulation. They're great at sticking together. And I think they're better at political strategy than the Republicans. Your thoughts?
Oh, they've proven that time after time. Republicans tend to get very upset, get very angry, but they don't actually follow through. I mean, the length of time that it took to put together the Steele dossier and the length of time over that the Democrats have weaponized the government. I mean, remember, we had the IRS weaponized under Obama, and now we're first seeing real results from it. You're talking about years of work. The Republicans don't have that kind of attention span.
No, they also didn't have the intestinal fortitude to do like the Steele dossier. A lot of window dressing. They didn't go head to head. There was no reason why that should have ever happened. But it's water under the bridge. It is interesting, though, to look at when you look at the political landscape and the Democratic Party. RFK Jr. is increasingly becoming extremely frustrated that he's really being censored.
Yes, the RFK Jr. campaign has been sidelined by cooperation of the DNC and the mainstream media because, again, anything he says is going to reflect badly on Joe Biden. And the idea of Joe Biden trying to debate RFK
Oh,
Jr., I mean, he can't do it. Biden does not have the mental fortitude. And
okay. Let's just be clear on one thing. There is no way Biden is debating anyone. RFK, Trump, Nikki Haley, my cat Carl. There's no way he's getting on that podium. Do you agree, my friend?
I hope you're wrong. I think they're going to try to, honestly, I think what they're going to try to do now that there's been all this talk about new COVID variants, and I think he will get on a debate, but he won't get on the stage. I think they will try to do it virtually where they can have somebody behind the camera feeding him information.
I think that's the only way it can possibly happen. And even with that, I'm not so sure it's going to go well. But speaking of not going well, he's basically dropped quite a bit in Iowa. He's actually dropped 19 points. He was up polling at 69. Now he's down to 50. RFK as well. He only dropped a couple of points, but that's a pretty 20 points is a big drop. Trump's also dropped, by the way, from 62 to 49. So is there something brewing?
I think there is. I think people are going to be very surprised at what goes on during the primaries. First of
I
all,
hope
both
so.
both Iowa and New Hampshire are absolutely infuriated with the DNC over them trying to put South Carolina's primary in front of them. In fact, New Hampshire today announced that there was an effort to keep Donald Trump off the ballot, and the state secretary of state said no, he will be on the ballot. And they basically told the DNC they're going to have the first in the nation primary, regardless of what the DNC wants. So you've
How would
got
that work? Can't the DNC call the shots? Because I think that's just not a mood or a trivial point or just a situation for political junkies. I believe if New Hampshire is the first primary and holds out on that, I think Biden will be embarrassed. Will he lose? Probably not. Will he be embarrassed? I believe so.
well, the way it works is that the DNC, as I said before, this is not a government agency. They cannot tell the Secretary of State when to hold a primary. They can make big deals about not having debates and not allowing other candidates, but elections are run by the states. And the DNC cannot tell Iowa and New Hampshire when they can have their primary. So it sets up a battle. You've got people who are very proud of their first in the nation status, and they're not going to give it up. And I think you're going to see more and more of these early states go, you know what? We've had it. You're trying to dismiss us. We're not going to put up with that. And I think on the Republican side, you're seeing more and more of these folks starting to come out and go, enough is enough. We
Enough
supported
is enough with what?
with Trump. We
Oh, that
we
I agree with.
we supported him, but there's 91 counts against him right now. His trials are going to be going on in the middle of this election. There are Republicans who are trying to keep him off the ballot. I think you're going to see, and I've said this over and over again, but the fact of the matter is, if you look at past elections, the front runners at this point in the campaign were not the candidates. And I think you're going to see as we get into 2024, as we start having, days till the actual votes and we start seeing people come out, I think you're going to see other Republicans stepping up and getting much higher vote counts than these polls would indicate.
For instance, Nikki Haley in head to head polling with Biden is the one that beats him the best or the most. The best, the most.
Yeah,
And I think if she was the Republican nominee, it would be a landslide, a Reaganist landslide, the likes of which we haven't seen since 81 or 1980, I should say.
I think that's possible. Nikki Haley has been coming up. She did a fantastic job at the debate. She has been taking on Vivek Ramaswamy because he's been making some absolutely ridiculous comments
I
on
think he's finished. I thought
yeah,
I had big hopes for him. I think he looked good. I don't mean physically. I mean he was
right.
very sharp. He's got energy. He's young, but I mean some of the things he said is just yikes,
And
not good.
honestly, at this point, I think the Republican ticket needs Nikki Haley. If she can win the primaries and take the top spot, great. I'm all for it. If she can't, she needs to be the vice president because she has the experience that the other candidates are lacking. And she
Well,
is
that brings up another
incredibly
situation.
intelligent.
Oh, and very qualified. But you look at what's going on. uh, there's been many commentaries about no labels. This is, third parties. I think Ross Perot was I guess it might have been 1992, came pretty close until he had his like mental breakdown, but he still got like 30 or 25%. It was definitely a very appreciable number. How about Nikki Haley as no labels?
That's not a bad idea. I do know No Labels has made the comments that they are looking for their ticket to be one member of each party. So, and I mean, there's been a lot of talk about Joe Manchin. I don't know what the status of that is, but imagine a Manchin Haley ticket. That could
I
throw a wrench into things.
I think it could throw many monkey wrenches. How does
Yes.
that sound? And even on the again on the political arena, sticking to that, I think it's we're looking at Hunter now being indicted with the gun felony. I think that will further damage Biden, especially as we have McCarthy putting the green light on an impeachment inquiry. And I think it will also be interesting because I truly believe, I don't know if you've seen it or all of our listeners have seen it, the July 4th balcony scene with the Bidens, the whatever the Beverly Hillbillies on the balcony. There was very little doubt in my mind that Hunter was let's just say a little coked out. So what do I bring that up? Because I think as the noose and the pressure gets more extreme, he could become once again unhinged, which will not reflect nicely on Uncle Joe. Your thoughts?
It will not reflect well on Joe. My interest is piqued by the fact that apparently when Hunter's lawyers were negotiating the now failed plea deal, one of the things that they said they would do if they didn't get the deal was to subpoena Joe Biden. Now, honestly, I have no problem believing that in order to get a lighter sentence or possibly escape jail altogether, Hunter Biden would throw his father under the bus.
I have to say one thing. I do remember when during Iran Contra when Reagan was certainly had dementia and it was recorded let's just say interrogation. Um, I think Biden will make Reagan look like a menzic. Biden on the stand being cross-examined. Yikes! That could never see the light of day. There is no way. If that ever got out, yikes.
No,
It
he
would be
couldn't.
great entertainment for me, but for him, it'd be game over.
Yeah, no, there's no way he could handle it. Unless, of course, and this is a real possibility, his Justice Department just treats him with kid gloves and spoon feeds him some questions. And it wouldn't surprise me for them to do so.
No, nothing would surprise me. But it is, heating up. I mean, there's comes out. It's just came out. There's been a fourth email alias. I mean, you tell you, Dr. Loppin, real smart guy. Please tell me why you would possibly need for as a vice president for aliases, email aliases, if something non kosher was going on.
Yeah, it's all everything about the emails, everything about the shell companies. This is what criminals do to cover their tracks. The
And
shell company,
not particularly bright criminals.
right?
Okay, there we
But
go.
all of it, again, the big Democratic rallying cry is, well, show us the bank record that has Joe Biden getting money directly. That's not how criminal enterprises work. That's not how Rudy Giuliani brought down John Gotti. It's not how Elliot Ness took down Al Capone. They had to go through all of these things to find where the money was going. You don't, if you're running a criminal enterprise, you don't get payments directly.
No, that would even be even Biden's smart enough not to do that. Barely smart enough. But yes, I mean, let's just face it. He's always been stupid. He's even stupider now. I'm sure there's a treasure trove of information and evidence against him because he's not exactly James Bond.
No, and that's why McCarthy finally said we have to go forward with an impeachment inquiry. This does not mean they're going to impeach Joe Biden. And in fact, most Republicans don't want to impeach Joe Biden because if they get rid of him, it puts Harris in the top seat. But what an impeachment inquiry does is it allows investigators to get a hold of more information.
Exactly. And I think that's a good move. I think, yes, in the end, except for the nutcases in the Republic? No, you don't want them impeached. You just want the information out there. And I think that's a very good move. Now, I did compare him or not compare him to James Bond, just real quick. We always talk about go woke, go broke. The next James Bond movie, he will be woke Bond. That should go over really well, correct? When will they learn?
Well, I think part of this is, not to go into too much of what goes on behind the scenes, but MGM, which is the studio that has produced James Bond forever, was not that long ago bought by Amazon. We know Jeff Bezos is woke. So, that's what happens. You start to see little by little all these things going on. And I think it's going to bite him in the butt.
Pardon me, but James Bond, what woke James Bond? That's like a slow cheetah. I mean, it just doesn't exist,
Yeah,
and it makes no sense.
it's
But
a
we'll see
it's a
that.
bad it's a bad decision among bad decisions. Right now, Hollywood is getting desperate for content because of the strikes, so they'll put out just about anything.
I will say something that's interesting about, and we talked about it last week, so I don't want to belabor a point about putting out everything. Force Five, I still
Oh,
can't get over that. That was they didn't mean it to be hysterical. I thought it was the funniest thing they've done in years because it just exemplified and shed light on how untalented these political hacks really are. They're not
well,
comedians.
if you found it funny, get yourself a plane ticket and head out to Vegas because Force 5 is doing a live show
What do they
in
think they are? The whatever it called the with
the,
Sinatra,
the Rat Pack.
the Rat Pack. Oh God! Do you know what's going to be funny? They unless they're giving away tickets, what person in their right mind is going to see? Or they might even get heckled.
Well, I think it's supposed to be a fundraiser for the striking writers. So they're not going to give away tickets if their goal is to raise money. So we'll see how this goes over.
We have to stay abreast of that, no question about it. Um, well, Biden, you're looking at, obviously reelection. Inflation was the highest it's been in August all year, and we were looking at a UAW, a potential of a UAW strike. And plus, we just had this week that his administration put the kibosh on oil leasing in Alaska. I mean, help me.
Yeah, it honestly it looks like Bidenomics. the main goal of it is to destroy the American economy. The
Yes.
Saudis and Russians both cut back oil production. So, how does Biden respond? Knowing full well that cuts in production will cause the prices to go up, he takes 13 million acres of prime oil land out of the hands of the oil industry, saying, nope, you cannot drill here, and in fact, canceled existing leases. So,
Okay, but how
oh,
politically stupid is that? I mean, again, stupid and Biden, they're almost synonymous at this point. I mean, we're getting into the political season. It's really starting to get, serious now. I believe gas will be touching $5 a gallon, not too in the not too distant future.
in some
Home
places, it
heating
already
oil.
has. In
So
some
what the
places, it's
heck is he
already.
thinking?
Well, it's Biden. He's not thinking.
There you go.
The Demo
The
the
answer. You are
Democrat
correct.
Yeah, the Democrats are so focused on climate change. And yet, when you look at the polls as to what is important to the American people, climate change is not at the top. People are worried about the economy. And in fact, I talked about this on yesterday's Raw Naked Truth podcast. I had Chris Calandra on, where we were talking about economic issues. And over the weekend, Bloomberg released a study where Americans were saying that by either fourth quarter this year or first quarter next year, they're going to be cutting back on consumer spending, primarily because the basics have gotten so expensive. And now the savings that people had accumulated during
Zero.
COVID from not going out and from stimulus packages, that savings is gone.
And also, credit card debt is exploding, and the
Yes.
default rate on credit cards. So, I now let me ask you another question. We came up with the analogy about when your house is on fire, you don't really give a shit if the fireman's an asshole. Is that going to be increasingly come into play, even if Trump is the nominee? Because I think it will.
Oh, it
Because
abs
if you're $30,000, $20,000 in credit card debt, you can't make ends meet. Do you really give a shit if the guy's an asshole?
it's absolutely going to come into play. In 2020, it didn't, because the economy was in an artificial stall. So you couldn't say, well, there's no way Biden's going to do a good job. There was no, Biden campaigned. He was going to bring everybody together. He was going to be the adult in the room. Now, everybody knows that's a lie. And they've seen that he has destroyed the economy. Families are struggling paycheck to paycheck, where just the basics are costing them 700 extra dollars in some case,
And going and rising.
and rising. So,
Yeah, I think that what we talked about weeks ago will come more and more into play. And think about this, Dr. Lopkin and our listeners. If Trump's not the nominee and it is someone like Nikki Haley, then the whole asshole theory is gone. Now you have think about it, you have someone people like and someone who's a abject failure and they don't like, which is true. I think the landslide vision could easily come into play.
oh, yes. So in 2020, Biden had faith on his side. People knew what Trump was. They knew what he had done. They knew what his policies were, and they knew how obnoxious he could be. Biden had faith. The vast majority didn't know how he would do the job, what he was planning to do. They took his promises on faith. Well, he
They
doesn't
wanted relief also from,
Yes.
let's say, the stress, the fatigue of Trump. I think that was a key point as
Yes.
well.
In
You could,
2024, he doesn't have that. People know, oh, okay, even if Trump is the nominee, they know what Trump is like. but now they know what Biden is like. And the fact of the matter is, Trump may have been annoying, Trump may have been obnoxious,
An
but
asshole.
when you went to the supermarket, you weren't worried about filling your cart. When you went to the gas station, you weren't worried, are you going to have enough to fill up your car?
100% agree. And you'd also don't worry because I think there's another ticking time bomb that over 20% of border people who have crossed the border illegally, we have no idea who they are, where they are. Is that not a situation just rife with disaster and a
It is,
ticking time bomb?
it is a ticking time bomb. We don't
Because not
know
just from
who's coming.
Mexico, they're coming in from all over the world, unvetted and unchecked. And once they're here, we have no idea where they are. Excellent.
Yeah, it's a horrible situation, and now the liberal sanctuary cities are starting to see this as a major problem. And Biden is not making it any better because he refuses to change his policies. And in fact, he had made some comments. I don't remember what the exact comment was, but he made some comments about New York and Eric Adams that just put me in mind of the 70s. Ford to New York, drop dead. Well, now it's Biden to New York, drop dead. Guess what? If New York City Democrats stay home, if San Francisco Democrats stay home and the Democrats actually have to struggle to get the electoral votes from New York and California, they're done for.
I actually think it's a real California. I don't buy. I think it's a real possibility because if you separate New York City from the rest of New York, New York is actually a conservative state. Right leaning. I, I think
Well, and
the
remember in 2022, despite the Republicans not doing all that well in the midterms, they picked up congressional seats in New York City.
I think it's a real possibility. I think again another misstep, another miscalculation, but it doesn't surprise me because I'll quote Ted Cruz: "You have someone asleep at the switch, with a bunch of 25-year-old Ivy League Leninists at the helm," and I think that's pretty much what's going on. No experience, no work reference. So that's what happens when you have a bunch of theoretical shitheads. We also have the New York, I'm sorry, New Mexican governor, another liberal, out of
Oh,
touch idiot, basically saying she has the power to declare an emergency proclamation, therefore severely limiting carry access to handguns. And I like the police chief basically said, well, I'm not following through on that. I think that was a political suicide move by her.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the police chief is right. The police's job is to enforce the law. And there is nothing that gives a governor the ability to overturn the
The Constitution,
Constitution. It's,
another genius, Democratic genius, yes. And also, it's really interesting because, yes, New Mexico leans left, but they do not lean left when it comes to gun rights and the Second Amendment. So, girl genius, you kind of screwed that one up, and it's going to be impossible to put that genie back in the bottle. Sorry. Oh, well.
no, and if she does try to enforce this, it will go to court. The Supreme Court will strike it down because there is nothing about this order that is constitutional.
100% agree. I don't know what she was thinking about, but I got my own problems. Then on kind of two stories that are a much lighter note, we have Aaron Rodgers, his 5 minute debut as the Jets quarterback, probably the most expensive 5 minutes in sports history. Your thoughts?
Yeah, as a Jets fan, I find nothing lighter about this. This was heart. I mean, the Jets managed to win without him, which was the only
Which was
silver
amazing.
lining.
I shut off the
But
game after Rodgers.
yeah,
Yeah.
but what was worse than it happening is the fact that this is not the first time this happened. Years ago, the Jets were talked about as they were going to go all the way to the Super Bowl, led by Vinny Testaverde, and
Yes,
on the first play of the season, Vinny Testaverde was injured, taken out of the game. We never heard from him again. It was, to quote Yogi Berra, it was deja vu all over again.
I was actually looking forward. Just so you know, I'm an Eagles fan, but I was kind of going to adopt the Jets as my second favorite team. I was really looking forward to it. So basically, it doesn't make me happy either. But I thought it was profound and also indicative of the New York Jets. I'm sorry, they just
Yes.
have a dark cloud over them ever since Broadway Joe. Our final story, on a lighter note, is we have a Democratic House representative in Virginia, Susan Gibson, and it just came out that she had a nice career being a web porn star. Does it hurt or help? I don't know. You're the
I don't know
political
if
expert.
it hurts or help. I mean, quite frankly,
She's pretty hot, actually.
I think it's indicative of Bidenomics. She needed, she couldn't make ends meet on her political salary, so she had to take a side hustle.
There you go. Maybe she's instead of the big guy, the big gal, right?
Right.
Well, Dr. Lopkin, that concludes another edition of Carnivore Bites. Our listeners and other people can access us in many venues. In fact, I was at iHeartRadio on my TV the other night listening to our last episode. So it's out there, isn't it?
It is out there, and I'm actually blanking on the name, but I was just informed a couple of days ago there is a new news platform that is picking up news podcasts, and they reached out and said they are now carrying Carnivore Radio. So we're picking up new platforms. People who know about news are carrying us. And of course, you can catch every episode of Carnivore Bites at xvadio.com/podcasts, as well as the Carnivore Radio website, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech.
So, in a not too distant future, it won't be a lark that we overtake in viewers, listeners, Anderson Cooper.
It's a distinct possibility the way he's going.
There you go. Well, thank you, Dr. Lopkin, and I'll see you next week.
We'll see you then.